Unfortunately, the only thing I'm good at is drawing flowers. And the reason I do random pictures, sometimes the conditions are so rare that I cannot find a picture for them, or I don't feel comfortable showing the real picture of it because of YouTube's rules and just me as a person, because I rather not show the real condition. I just rather show an illustration, but sometimes I can't find that, so I just throw up a random picture like my cats. We are doing something new. Today I'm going to be drawing while looking and listening to the video. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want me to do more of the drawing stuff with medical. Anyway, onto the video.
Black hearing coming on. He thought that there was no oxygen getting to my tissue.
Gangrene is a type of tissue death which occurs as the result of an insufficient supply of blood. Without treatment, it can quickly spread to vital organs and lead to death.
It was extremely upsetting to hear him say that word, amputation. I was scared out of my mind because I couldn't imagine life without my legs. He went to my heel and he felt a pulse. So he said to the nurse, I'm not going to take them off yet, but we're going to have to keep a close eye on it. And if we lose that pulse in her heel, then call me back immediately. And he left the room. I was so glad when that doctor was heading out the door. After he left, I thought to myself, I don't ever want to see that doctor again.
I don't blame
because I just did not want to lose my legs.
Over the next several days, doctors find themselves racing against the clock, performing countless blood tests in an all-out effort to determine why Diane's legs have turned pitch black.
They test me for leukemia. They tested me for some types of lymphoma cancer. They tested me for rheumatoid arthritis. And day after day, I got no answer.
I don't know why they would test you for rheumatoid arthritis.
They had no idea why I had this attack, what it meant, what it was connected to, nothing. I rested in bed under the covers, and I prayed for an answer.
But the tests reveal nothing. And after 5 days, the swelling and discoloration simply fade away on their own, leaving the doctors completely baffled.
They decided to discharge me because they didn't know what was wrong or what had brought it on. It was horrible. I mean, how many times can my legs keep coming back? I didn't know.
Frightened and frustrated, Diane returns home. But the mysterious attacks only intensify.
What started to be 1 day a week became 2 days a week, then 3 days a week of flaring. Like I'd work through Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, I was having a flare up. And by the Saturday night, I was completely unable to walk. I was embarrassed to really talk about it or show anyone what was happening, but it was becoming increasingly more difficult to hide the symptoms.
I hope you like my drawing.
I remember her being on crutches at school. Her legs looked like just the surface blood vessels had just burst, and it would turn real red, bruised, and black and blue, and it slowed her down.
I wasn't able to give my students everything that they needed. I was distracted by my own pain, and no matter how hard I tried to overcome it, I wasn't able to walk well or play with them. I was missing more and more work. Going
For the past 2.5 years, Diane Dyke has been plagued with excruciatingly painful episodes of swelling and horrific discoloration in her legs. And although she's seen dozens of doctors, not one of them has been able to explain her baffling symptoms.
My doctor was really frustrated with my case. He didn't know what else to do, so he decided that he was going to send me to the University of South Florida to see if they could help figure out what this mystery disease was.
Hopefully.
In February of 1993, Diane makes an appointment with dermatologist Dr. Philip Schenefeld at the University of South Florida in Tampa.
Cryoglobuinemia?
We talked with her about her problem and examined her skin. Clinically on the skin, she had little sort of purplish marks, what's called palpable purpura, that were slightly raised. There were also some reddish areas. As she sat there in our office, she was gradually getting a few more of the purple spots moving up her leg. I don't recall having seen anything with the purpura where they were just appearing right in front of us.
Related to blood vessels rupturing.
It's a critical clue for Dr. Schenefeld, and in that moment, the mysterious case of Diane Dyke suddenly comes into focus.
Our office tends to be kept fairly cool. The spreading made us wonder whether there was some factor, such as cold, that was making
That's
her
what I was going to ask. Is the cold
have these
causing blood
spread.
vessels to rupture?
At that point, I felt that we needed to test for a specific protein that might be related to cold exposure that might be involved in this process.
He seemed rather confident, but I had also heard that from the doctor before that, so I knew better than to get my hopes up too
I don't
high.
blame you.
To confirm his hunch, Dr. Schenefeld has Diane's blood drawn and sent to the lab for testing.
It was exhausting to wait to hear something that could be great news or it could be bad news, but I just wanted to hear some news so we could get to the bottom of it.
Exactly.
The wait seems endless. But finally, 6 days later, the results are in.
My hunch was confirmed. Diane did have cryoglobulinemia.
Cryoglobulinemia is a blood disorder in which the body produces excessive amounts of defective antibodies called cryoglobulins. In healthy individuals, antibodies help fight bacteria and viruses. But in patients like Diane, dangerous amounts of the faulty antibodies are produced. When her temperature drops significantly below 98.6 degrees, these cryoglobulins can cluster together in blood vessels, blocking circulation and inflaming the vessel walls.
Cryoglobulinemia
I don't think there's a
means
cure.
cold, globe-like structure
I'm pretty sure it can be
in the
treated.
blood. In Diane's
I
blood,
just have
what's
to see.
happening is that the blood, as it chills, it turns into a sort of a semi-solid. Just like if you mix up a batch of Jell-O and pour it into a mold and you let it sit and then you cool it, her blood turns into the jelly-like material.
The moment that he told me that I had cryoglobulinemia, I remember feeling as if I was in a vacuum. I could see his mouth moving, but I really wasn't making out what the words were that he was saying. That just really didn't make any sense to me.
A better example would
Dr.
have been
Schenefeld goes on to explain that all of Diane's seemingly unrelated symptoms were triggered by the air conditioning in her home and school.
When the cooling occurs and the blood gels in the little vessels in the skin, blood behind it can't get through. The cryoglobulins were also signaling an inflammatory process to start up in the blood vessel. Then that weakens the vessel wall, and so the vessel can actually break and have blood leak out.
I started to look back and realize that I would go outside with my students and get sweaty and warm and come back into the cold, and I was having flare-up after flare-up.
With each episode, her blood vessels would rupture, causing the severe discoloration and swelling.
As the blood vessels burst, initially the color is more reddish, and once it's out in the tissues for a while, it can change more to a blackish color. There can be swelling because the blood has difficulty getting back up the legs because the channels have been damaged.
Because the blood vessel breaks. They start out
Unbeknownst to Diane, every time she crawled into bed, she was helping to diminish the effects of the condition.
Staying at home under the covers would allow the legs to warm, would allow the
less time
jelly
the blood
material
vessels are
to
healing.
turn back to
In other words, the bruises
normal
are
liquid.
healing.
But
And
as
then
soon as she was back on her feet, her legs would be exposed to cool air again, and the agonizing attacks would return with a vengeance.
It was all kind of starting to come together, but it was hard to grasp everything he was explaining to me.
And after struggling with the debilitating disease for more than 2 years, Diane can't help but wonder why it took so long to get a diagnosis.
Cryoglobulinemia is relatively rare. We don't know why people like Diane develop this process. Cryoglobulins will not show up specifically in other blood tests. It takes doing the specific procedures to look for them, to find them.
But the harsh truth is undeniable. If Diane had not been properly diagnosed when she was, her future would have been bleak.
It's possible to have kidney failure or problems with circulation in the heart that might lead to heart attack or stroke. Progressive damage to the blood vessels can lead to either difficulty with walking or actual need for amputation.
I asked him, what can I take to make my body get better again? And what he told me would change my life forever.
I guess no cure. Most of these rare diseases.
Diane Dyke has just discovered that she has an extremely rare and potentially life-threatening blood disorder called cryoglobulinemia. It causes her blood to solidify into a jelly-like substance when her body temperature drops significantly below 98.6 degrees.
Got to the
I
really
thought,
rare ones.
it'll be such a
Sometimes they're not
blessing
even
when that's
treatment.
over and I don't have to face that day after day.
Unfortunately, though,
Which
Diane
I'm
must
trying to
now
avoid
learn
those
to live with a
cases,
grim reality.
Sad.
There's no cure that we know of for cryoglobulinemia. The first treatment is to keep the extremities warm. Another factor that can be used to treat the inflammation is a steroid anti-inflammatory.
I had expected there would be a clean-cut answer to overcome it and to beat it.
Nope.
But that was not what I got. So it was a very overwhelming moment.
Individuals with cryoglobulinemia have to avoid exposure to cold as a key factor in their daily living. We don't think what it would mean to have that kind of limitation in our lives.
The normal everyday activities that I'd so often taken for granted would not be safe for me to do anymore. So I had to wear gloves and mittens and lots of layers of clothing. Then that's just not something that's normal in a grocery store in Florida, to see someone with full-on ski gear just to get through their shopping experience.
Diane must also make sure to limit the amount of stress put on her body, which unfortunately means giving up her most cherished hopes.
It is inadvisable for someone with cryoglobulinemia to have children. Blood clots are a higher incident during pregnancy. That broke my heart. I'd always wanted to have children. I even had their names picked out.
There's always a
It's a
doctor.
trying time for Diane, but over the years she has learned to manage her disease, even though it has meant letting go of her career goals.
I had to give up my life dream and my career of teaching. The variables
what
that
I
I
was gonna
couldn't
say.
control in the classroom were just too dangerous for me. And it was so disappointing. I felt so alone. But then the athlete in me wanted to rise up and say, okay, we can beat this.
Today, 16 years since she was diagnosed, Diane is successfully fighting her disease. Her optimism and spirit were the first things Paul Dyke noticed when they were introduced.
At a dinner party, I met Paul, and less than a month later, he proposed to me on Valentine's Day.
Diane is my hero. Her ability to look at life in the positive way that she does has impacted so many people.
He's tried to help me every step of the way to find a way to overcome this disease.
Diane is a go-getter. It's amazing what she does despite her physical challenges.
Through our organization called